I'm delighted to have you on. Thanks for joining us for our Beann Eadair talk. Shane, as I'm sure people know, is a neighbour of ours, born and raised just up the road in Portmarnock and a proud member of Marnogue's GAA. And I know, Shane, you've been sports mad from a young age. You've represented in football at both minor and senior level, and you've featured recently on the Late Late Show, where you've talked about, and you've opened up really bravely, I have to say, about your battle with depression, and also you've released a book entitled Dark Blue. So Shane, listen, thanks again for joining us tonight, and I'll let you chat to us about your journey to where you are today. So listen, dying to hear all you have to say.
Yeah, perfect. And thank you very much, Shane. That's very, very kind of you. And yeah, you just kind of covered it there in terms of, I guess, the format for everyone just to have an idea is basically, I'll just take you through my journey from literally younger years and in primary school right the way to secondary school, and kind of maybe in a different part of my life, and then my life thereafter. So my kind of hope is from tonight over the next kind of 20 or so minutes as I take you through my journey is that you take one thing from my talk today and spread it far and wide. So anything at all. It may resonate with you throughout the story, and then of course then we'll go into the Q&A, and don't be shy, you won't offend me at all. I'm sure Jane has a lot of questions there as well, so yeah, absolutely. Is it all okay just before I begin? Is that
go for it? Brilliant. Yeah,
okay,
Wi-Fi's a little patchy, just to warn you, but we'll get through it.
Okay, perfect. Just give us a wave if I break it off at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so just to give you a little context, I guess to bring you back to my early days where I grew up, where it all happened for me in the north side of Dublin, beautiful seaside town in Portmarnock, and I was cast into absolutely every single sport possible, Gaelic, soccer, hurling, swimming, you name it. And the common theme throughout my story, as you hear tonight, is I was cast up in this pedestal. I was seen as this limelight figure, living this idyllic life. Now, I didn't want to be up here, but such as my relative talent in sports, this is where I found myself. And I guess this kind of talent in sports was echoed every single sports day. I went down to attend my local primary school, where my skill set was brought upon by Paddy Gorey, a proud Portmarnock man, a proud Beann Eadair man now as well. But it was every single sports day where I particularly kind of had a goal in mind to be awarded Junior Sports Boy of the Year, come third class. And, probably not such a big deal now, but looking back, it certainly was the biggest thing we could go ahead and achieve. And something that I did manage to achieve, I was awarded Junior Sports Boy of the Year in third class, and I repeated that feat yet again in fourth class. So awarded 2 years Junior Sports Boy of the Year, and you can imagine how my peers had seen me in around that time, this pedestal-like figure growing even larger. So what was next on my agenda then in fifth and sixth class was to be awarded Senior Sports Boy of the Year. And I even remember the sports days, and my mum would come up with a couple of bottles of Luke's Aid, wine gums, packs to have my energy levels brimming. And that's how serious I took it. I guess all the other lads were kind of slagging me and everything, but that was actually how serious I was taking it. And it was a feat that I managed to achieve again. I was awarded Senior Sports Boy of the Year up in fifth and sixth class, and 4 years in a row, this pedestal-like figure growing even larger. So that would then brought me to the end of sixth class, and granted, yes, in a smaller context, my Dublin career would have began. It was where I was representing the under 12 North Dublin team in a small Easter tournament. We were due to face South Dublin and West Dublin, and after that, I was actually the only man in my area to represent North Dublin for this particular tournament, which I actually went ahead and captained them to victory in this particular tournament. And you can imagine then I'm walking into school on Monday morning, and the lads asked me, what were you at on the weekend? I was like, I actually just captained Dublin to the Easter tournament. Yet again, how my peers had seen me, the pedestal-like figure grown even larger. So then that would have brought me then into my transition into secondary school. And I'm sure you can all relate, a very, very difficult transition. A lot of kind of getting used to new surroundings, new friends, new teachers, a lot of adjusting. But such was my relative talent in sports and my popularity among friends, it was seamless for me. And in first, second, and third year, I continued along that trend of playing, Gaelic, soccer, hurling, swimming, threw my hand at absolutely anything. And I was lucky enough then throughout kind of first, second, and third year to be awarded numerous Sports Boy of the Year accolades and whatever I threw my hand at, in particular Gaelic and soccer. I had aspirations of playing for Dublin in a packed capacity crowd in Croke Park in front of 82,500 people. And then on other days, I had massive aspirations of playing for Manchester United and Old Trafford one day. So I had big dreams as a kid, and I'm sure as we all do anyway. So I continued along that trend, particularly kind of under 13s, 14s, 15s, throughout the Dublin development teams. And my two true loves were certainly Gaelic and soccer. And I was torn between the two by the time I got to fourth year now. I just whittled it down to two, Gaelic and soccer. I was torn between the two, wasn't too sure what I was going to go with, because I was coming up to the stage of my life where I would have had to solely focus on just one. I was coming up to the stage of training 5-6 times a week and taking it that bit more seriously. And that would have brought me to the middle of fourth year, where I met a man who's very, very pivotal in my story today, in the shape of Dessie Farrell. And those of you who don't know who Dessie Farrell is, he's, of course, the former CEO of the Gaelic Players Association. And he's also now, obviously, the Dublin senior football manager. And it was the middle of fourth year where Dessie had, rang me up and he said, look, we want you representing the Dublin minor footballers. And this is where you could really say where your Dublin career really does begin. So my decision was made from there. I dropped the soccer and solely focus on Gaelic football in that particular stage. So the middle of fourth year, a stall was set out. Let's reach the All-Ireland final and get our hands on the All-Ireland minor trophy. Fortunate enough, we did. We actually got to the All-Ireland final. But unfortunately, we lost out to a last-minute Tipperary goal. So hugely devastating for me and many of the other lads on the team. But lucky enough for me and a couple of the other guys, we had a chance to right that wrong the very following year, which would have been my second year of Dublin minor football. And that now would have brought me to the middle of fifth year, where I didn't know then what I now know was the start of depression. And it would have been very, very sporadic. It maybe would have been once or twice a month. And I very much would have had things to look forward to, whether it be, a Dublin match and out with my friends, out with my family, or even a little trip away at the weekend. But for whatever reason, I just couldn't, the cloudiness was beginning to build up and I couldn't quite make sense. Why can't I, attack this day or look forward to it? And as I referred to earlier on in my story, I was seen as this pedestal-like figure living this great life, representing Dublin. So I felt like I couldn't show any perceived sign of weakness, what I associated with how I was feeling. So my crutch, my medication then around that time was football. I'm sure you can all relate those kind of physical endorphins, those happy endorphins that we release post-exercise. That's what was keeping me going at this particular stage. So in the middle of fifth year, our stall was set out. We want to right the wrong from the previous year and go one step further, get our hands on the All-Ireland minor trophy. Fortunately enough, we did. Come that September time, we got to the All-Ireland final and we got our hands on the All-Ireland minor trophy after defeating Meath by 6 points in this particular game. So now 6 months into my journey through depression with no one none the wiser, I was now on top of the Hogan Stand steps in front of 82,500 people with the All-Ireland minor trophy cast high above my head. You can imagine then from the outside looking in what people had thought of me, this man living this idyllic life. And that now would have brought me to the start of 6th year, embarking on my leaving cert year, a very stressful year for many, as I'm sure you can all relate if you'd like to get to that point of a stressful year. And a couple of months went by after the All-Ireland minor final. It was now November time. And I was down the village with the lads, and I'll never forget this day. I'd actually received a phone call off Michael Deegan, who was Jim Gavin's selector at the time. Jim Gavin had, of course, just been appointed Dublin senior football manager for the upcoming 2013 campaign. And Mick had met me with the news that Jim had wanted me up with the Dublin senior footballers come that January 2014. And now at this stage, 1 year through my journey through depression, I'm sat in a dressing room next to people who I idolised. Stephen Cluxton, Bernard Brogan, Paul Flynn, all these guys who I'd looked upon on the hill with my dad in the early days. I was now sat alongside them and playing with them. So as you can imagine how my peers had seen me. And it was so funny, even in around that time, I was still in school. We had early morning gym sessions sometimes on a Tuesday and Thursday, 6 a.m. gym sessions, and we'd finish up and I'd be getting into my school uniform and Clucko would be there getting into his normal clothes for his teaching uniform. And he was like, you could be in my class this afternoon, if you were in my school, So such was the rarity of the situation that I found myself in. I was so lucky. But little did people know the internal dialogue that was going deep within at this stage. So my leaving cert had come and gone, and I could solely focus on the football championship that coming summer. Our inevitable goal, Jim had told us, was to get our hands on the Sam Maguire come that September time. Unfortunately enough, yet again, we got to the All-Ireland final, where we defeated Mayo by a point in this particular game. And now a year just after lifting the All-Ireland minor trophy, I'm now back on top of the Hogan Stand steps in front of 82,500 people with the Sam Maguire cast high above my head at 18 years of age. I'll never forget the moment. A week after the All-Ireland final was the first thoughts I had of dying by suicide. And the internal dialogue that I was having with myself was, I'm 18 years of age, I'm overachieving in my career to date, and last week I just had the Sam Maguire cast high above my head in front of 82,500 people, and yet I want no part of this world. How could I say anything to anyone? I was thinking. So as I did for that previous year and a half, I shut up shop, I put up that poker face, put up that mask, and said absolutely everything was A-okay in my life. that crutch, that medication continued to be football in around that time. So that now would have brought me into January 2014 with these suicidal ideations not leaving too far by my side. I didn't want to act upon what I was thinking. I didn't want to do anything, but this never left my side and never went too far away from me. So in around that January 2014, now 2 years on, I'm now building up the courage. Okay, I need to speak up here. I need to speak up. I need to say something to my mum and dad. But unfortunately, and around that time was a very, very pivotal moment in both my life and my family's life. I was now representing the under 21 Dublin footballers, and we were gearing up for the championship in just a couple of months' time. And we had a friendly match down in Cork. And right to this day, as my mum and dad do, they travel right around the country with me, whether it be a club match, an inter-county match, or a college match. And my mum and dad went down to this particular game down in Cork. And halfway through, unbeknownst to me, my mum receives a phone call off my uncle to say her dad had passed away, that my granddad, of course, passed away. I was, of course, unaware of it at the time. I was playing the game, so my mum and dad went off home, and I followed in just shortly after coming off the team bus. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning where I'd met my mum and dad in the sitting room, and I was thinking, there's something not quite right here. Why are they standing in the sitting room at 1 o'clock in the morning? And it was here where they met me with the news that my granddad unfortunately passed away. And such it was the numbness, the lack of emotion that I could attach to absolutely anything at that stage. I simply said, I'm sorry, and I left the room. And that was the first warning sign for my mum and dad, because such a piece of difficult news, you know. I would have been so close to my granddad. I would remember the times of every couple of weeks I'd visit him, and he would have told me I should have scored another 10 goals in whatever game I was playing in. So with the reaction such like that was definitely the first warning sign for my mum and dad. And as I said, I was trying to build up the courage to maybe say something to them. But because of the past on my granddad, I felt like I couldn't burden an already burdened family. So a couple of weeks went by after my granddad's funeral, and I'm now building up the courage yet again. Okay, I need to speak up. I need to speak up here. But unfortunately, just 6 weeks after the past on my granddad, my nanny had passed away too, both my mum's side. So you can imagine then the internal dialogue what I'm having. Whatever I'm going through in my life can't even compare to what my mum and family are going through. My mum has lost both her mum and dad within the space of 6 weeks. So whatever I'm going through, as I did for those previous 2 years, I shut up shop, I put up that poker face, and I had football as my outlet, my medication at that time. So as I said, it was a busy under-21 championship, and we're now brought to a very, very pivotal time in my life. It was a Wednesday morning. I had Leinster final to look forward to that evening. We were due to face Meath down in Portlaoise. And on that Wednesday morning, as my mum came into the sitting room where I was with a bowl of porridge, because at 19 years of age, apparently I couldn't make my own porridge. I still can't, by the way. But nevertheless, she came in with the bowl of porridge and she met me in a flood of tears. And as to why I was crying, I don't know. The emotional tap was just open at this stage. I couldn't quite make sense of it, and I couldn't hold it within anymore. So she sat beside me and put her arm around me as I wept for a couple of hours. So she contacted my middle sister, Mairead, who was off on that particular day, to say, look, can you bring Shane out just to distract him for a couple of hours before the game this evening? So my sister did. Mairead came over to the house and she brought me out for a couple of hours. And Mairead's bright idea, to this day, I still slag her. I don't know why she chose this, but her bright idea to distract me before a big Leinster final game was to bring me out in a cliff walk out in the Hills of Howth. As to why she chose this, I don't know. But it was just knowing that I had that listening ear, that listening shoulder that I so deeply needed for those previous 2 years. And I didn't speak a whole lot on this trip. I think spoke no more than 5 words, and that was it. The cliff walking come to an end. I came back into the car. And never forget, as I closed the door, as if when I closed the door, all those thoughts and feelings from the previous 2 years came bundling straight back in. And it was as if, you know, it was the first time I was facing up to maybe not even football can be my outlet at this stage. Such was the inner turmoil that was going deep within. And I had my manager, Desi Farrell, at the time, from pushing a button away to say, look, I can't go through with this Leinster final tonight in this packed Portlaoise crowd. I'm in such a bad way here. To this day, I don't know why. I never went through with that phone call. So I went off home and I got my gear bag ready, and I met the lads in the team hotel for the pre-match meal just a couple hours previous before the game. And I didn't eat anything here, as maybe half a sup of water, and that was it. We're off on the bus on to Portlaoise for this game. And I'm sure you can all relate as well. I had actually sat myself up at the top of the bus, and I had my hood up and I had my headphones on. I had a certain set of songs, a certain playlist that brought me to a happier time and place, whether it be with a family member, a friend, or a certain holiday. And I played it as loud as I could, solely to drown out the thoughts that were going deep within at this stage. And halfway through this bus journey, I'd actually contacted my middle sister, Mairead, to say, look, I'm in such a bad way here. I don't think I can do this evening. She texted me back to say the family were right behind me. They're going to be at the game and they want to see me out on that pitch. So I did. I arrived to the ground and I prepared for the match as I always did as I got into the dressing room. Took a half a sup of Lucozade, and I was off out into that pitch in Portlaoise. I'd say to this day, to be honest, it was the most satisfying 60 minutes of football that I have ever played in my life. I was like a kid in a playground again. I was literally running away from the thoughts that were going deep within at this stage. And if I'm right in remembering, I think it was 2 or 3 minutes left in the game. I think we're 4 or 5 points up. And I'm looking at the referee, and you're probably thinking, you know, I need to tell him to blow the whistle up. I was thinking the exact opposite. I was thinking, don't blow that whistle. I'm in heaven here. I don't want to get off this pitch. Inevitably, he did. He blew the whistle, but we were actually victorious in this particular game. And add to that, I was actually awarded man of the match. So as I'm walking on top of these steps, this pedestal-like figure, yet again, living this idyllic life, to collect this man of the match award, little did people know what I was going through only 12 hours previous in a flood of tears with my mum in my sitting room. They just seen this idyllic figure, yet again, living this great life, collecting his award. So I went back into the dressing room, I put my award back into my gear bag, and I went off home with my mum and dad. So I'll bring you back just a week previous. I actually have 3 sisters, one of which, Michelle, my oldest sister. Maybe I confide in her a bit more than I do with my other 2 sisters. So mum and dad knew what was going on for me around the stage. So they said, look, we're going to book a trip away to Stockholm where my oldest sister, Michelle, lived, to tell her everything I was perceived to be hiding. Little did they know, I didn't know what I was hiding. As I said, the cloudiness was an all-time high, and I couldn't quite make sense of it. But nevertheless, the next day after the Leinster final, I was off onto Stockholm to see my oldest sister, Michelle. And I was here where I met her with the news that I did with my mum and dad only a couple of weeks previous, that I've been feeling this way for the previous 2 years, and in recent months I've had thoughts of dying by suicide. And such a piece of difficult news, my sister so many thousand miles away, so deeply wanted to help me, and this is all I could furnish her with. So that trip was essentially null and void. I came back on that Sunday evening, and we're now less than a week away from an All-Ireland semi-final versus Cavan. And as I came back on that Sunday evening, I text my manager, Desi Farrell, to say, look, can I meet up with you tomorrow for a cup of coffee? I need to speak with you. And the reason why I did was Desi actually had previous depression, and he's also a previous psychiatric nurse. So I was hoping he was going to give me all the answers that I didn't have. So the next day I met Desi out in Santry in Costa Coffee. And for 45 or 50 minutes that I was with him, I was in a flood of tears. I was in a packed coffee shop. I was embarrassed. I was a 19-year-old, 6'3" man in a flood of tears, but I couldn't control my emotions at this stage. But for the 5 minutes that I did get to speak to Desi, I let him in what was going on for me for those previous 2 years. So he promised me that he'd get me the help that I so deeply needed. So he set me up an appointment with a psychologist in just 2 days' time, but I never got to that appointment. The following day, as I said, we're preparing for this All-Ireland semi-final now, less than a week away, and we're due to have a training camp out in DCU. My dad knew what was going on, so he said, look, I don't want you driving out on your own. I'm going to drive out to this training camp. So I went out to DCU. The train had come and gone, and we're now due to have a meeting out in Castleknock Hotel, just 20 minutes away from DCU. And along the journey from DCU to Castleknock Hotel, I took a massive spike in heart rate, a massive spike in adrenaline, and when it transpired next to a panic attack. I blacked out, and my next abiding memory is being woken up in St. Patrick's Mental Hospital. And I don't know if anyone on the call has seen the film Shutter Island. If you haven't, by the way, great film, go see it, please. Really, really good. But the analogy that they give off in this film is a dark, dreary room, people in straitjackets, headbutting walls. And this is, once I heard the term mental hospital, this is where I thought I was. It was absolutely anything but. As I walked into the breakfast room, I met people who I'm still friends with today. They made those couple of days maybe that bit easier than maybe what it should have been. I spent 11 weeks in St. Pat's in total. I'll never shy away from the fact it was the most difficult 11 weeks that I've ever faced up to in my life. It's facing up to things that I put away for far too long, 2 years too long at that. But 11 weeks went by, and my integration back into society was due, and a lot has happened for me since then. I went on to study an undergraduate degree in DCU in sports science that I most recently graduated from back in 2018. In 2019, I became an ambassador for Pieta House, doing talks such as this, albeit through Zoom these days, to hopefully affect people, maybe one person in that room at that particular day, not get to the depths that I once did. And in 2019, in April, the O'Brien Book Publishers, one of the biggest book publishing companies in the country, had approached me to write a book that I most recently published on the 1st of February, just there in the shape of dark blue. So as I said at the top of my talk, if there's one thing that you took from my talk today, please take that and spread it far and wide. Thank you.
Talking away on a news. The story of 2021 and 2020. Listen, Shane, thank you so much for that. That was your honesty and just the amount of information you've given us is just it's so powerful. So thank you so much. I know that, you know, look, especially during the pandemic, we're all seeing it firsthand, and it's really taken its toll. So what you've said to us is just so insightful. To me, I know you've talked a bit before about your toolbox, and I think that there's two things that we were thinking of in terms of the talk for tonight. And that's one, I know you've talked before about the role of the mentor, you know, and how our mentors can play such a positive role in the kids that they're coaching, you know, when we get back training, because I know the guys are missing the training so much. So interested to hear what you have to say on that. And then also in terms of, I know I've read a bit about you talking about your toolbox, and I know it's funny during pandemic for me, I know myself, if I'm not sleeping great, I've worked out myself what the basics are, and like for you, it's those simple things like exercise, getting out for that walk or whatever. So again, I'd be very interested to hear about your toolbox piece that that you found works for you, and I think that people are going to be genuinely very interested in it. So please share what you think.
Yeah, of course. And I'll just even touch upon the first thing of the toolbox, and then I'll get into kind of the mentors and coaches, what kind of things we can all do. But if I was to touch upon the toolbox first, I guess, you know, when I first coined it, my mental health toolbox, was actually back in St. Pat's. I just really like that kind of visual of having kind of tools in this toolbox that I could rely upon on my good and bad days, in particular my bad days. And as I touched upon there, it probably comes as no surprise if I was to name my top three, you know, things in my toolbox. Number one would, of course, be physical exercise. It just so happened to be football a lot of the times, but it can be a walk, a run, a swim, a cycle, whatever it may be. I think just those happy endorphins, you just can't quite beat it, and in particular around these times. Number two, one thing that I referred to there back in my story was the playlist or podcast. I have a certain set of songs, a certain playlist that brings me to happier time and place. And thirdly is actually just speaking with a friend, and probably albeit through Zoom again, or a socially distanced coffee or whatever it may be, but just having that comfort now of not having to hide anything, to actually being able to approach my friends or family and to say, look, I'm going through a bit of a stressful time. Is there any chance I can talk to you? And I think, Jane, it's very, very important for everyone listening on the call as well. It's very individualistic. What works for me may not work for you, but it's about going after what may work for you. And I'll actually refer to a story back in St. Pat's when I was in what was called the Young Adult Program. It was for 18 to 25-year-olds, as it were. And we're going around the room talking about, you know, what's in your mental health toolbox? What do you refer to on your bad day? And of course, here's me talking about my physical exercise, my playlist, speaking to friends. And it turns to the right of me as a 20-year-old male, as it were. And he goes, I do a bit of knitting. And I was looking at him with 10 is thinking, you're 20 years of age, what are you knitting for? But nevertheless, the next day I found myself in the Young Adult Program knitting away. It absolutely didn't work for me. My dad caned me for it. But I think it's just a prime example of, I was 19 years of age, physical exercise was my outlet, my happy place. He was 20 years of age and knitting worked for him. So what I would say to people is find out what works for you, find what makes you tick, and plan that in every single day and have that in your toolbox. And just even then to finish off kind of on that point, even around these kind of COVID times, in particular for everyone, coaches, you know, young people, old people, whatever it may be. One thing that I actually took from, you know, these COVID times, all the negativity from it, one positive that I had taken from it was a learning curve. It was a challenge. It has been a challenge and it still is. One thing that I kind of referred to back in St. Pat's was a big thing of mine was structure to my day. And I brought that in the first lockdown. I'm talking, it's crazy to think we're talking way back in March now, a year later. But a big thing for me was structure to your day. So within that, I always plan three things. So one thing that makes me tick, so physical exercise. Number two would be my non-negotiable. Probably for all of us, it's work, Monday to Friday, something probably we don't like doing or we don't particularly like, but we have to do it. It's a non-negotiable. And then thirdly is actually to have something to stimulate your mind. In my case, it has been reading. In your case, it may be something else, but just something to stimulate your mind. So that could be a piece of advice that people could take out of this from COVID times in particular, and to add on to your toolbox. And then I guess kind of, you know, if I'm speaking about kind of coaches and mentors, you know, how we can approach on both sides, you know, from a coach's point of view, if you're seeing a kid going through a difficult time or you're thinking there's someone, you know, not quite being themselves, how can we approach them? How can I, you know, take on board if they kind of come to me and say, look, I'm going through a bit of a difficult time. What can you do? So if we're to deal with kind of how do you approach a child or a player, and I referred to a story only 6 months ago that I had a personal kind of experience with my friend. If you're looking out to signs and symptoms, people kind of being withdrawn from the group, a bit quiet, a bit indifferent, not quite themselves, that was certainly a warning sign for me that I picked up upon 6 months ago with my friend. And I approached him. I said, look, I notice, you might be going through a bit of difficulty. Is there anything you want to talk about? I'm here if you want to talk. And Jane, when you're going through the most difficult of times, you have days where you want to talk and you have days where you don't want to talk. And I think I just so happened to catch him on a day where he didn't want to talk. Didn't take me up on it. But only 3 months ago, he'd approached me to say, look, I know you kind of said, you're here for me if I want to talk. I didn't quite feel like talking not too long ago. Is there any chance I can just bounce something off you? And we had a frank and open, honest discussion. And I think that's just a prime example of it. I caught him on a day where he didn't want to talk, but he knew he had that listening ear, that listening shoulder in the shape of me if he so needed. And he took up upon that. And then on the flip side as well, how you're probably asking, how will I react or how should I react if I'm receiving information? If someone approaches me saying, look, I'm a bit stressed here. Can I speak to you? Can I say something to you? It's important to say as well, don't try to be the doctor or psychologist in the room. You don't have to give them all the answers. Very often the time, when people are saying something to you, they're just looking for a little springboard, a little soundboard there just to convey a bit of their problems. Of course, empathize with them, relate to them if you can, or resonate with them in the shape of me. From my case, it was Desi when I'd spoken to him and he was relating to me and resonating with a lot of what I had said. But you don't have to give them all the answers. Be that springboard. If it is a serious situation, of course, help them. Be that kind of, walk them along the path of going on to PIADA or the IACP or St. Pat's or one of these kind of, professional organizations that can help them then their most difficult times. So that would be my kind of take as a kind of mentor point of view, what you can do on both sides of the coin.
Yeah, listen, that is absolutely brilliant, and it's so useful, Shane, everything you've said. Now I'd like to open it up to the floor. I know I've actually a few questions that people have given me, but so I would just say if there are Q&A, guys, we'd love to get your questions in. So if you can see on the right hand side of your screen, just the third icon in is your raise hand icon. If you want to raise your hand, then I know our Kieran Dunn and Cathal Fitzpatrick are working on the techie, so thanks a million, guys. So they'll come to you if needed. So I'll just start off with the questions that I've received in advance. So first of all, the first question we've received from one of our minors is, did you ever play against Beann Eadair?
Did I ever play against Beann Eadair? I actually think we did, actually, and funny enough, as far as I know, if I'm right in saying, Paddy, you can correct me on this one, we did actually play against him. Was the if I might remember, it was up in the PSLC in Portmarnock, where there was that little indoor hurling tournament.
Oh yes, yeah.
And I think that was maybe only a couple of times that I played. I've never actually played them in under 15s or 16s out in a full size pitch or anything like that. But in a small kind of back in the day when I played a bit of hurling.
Very good. So you haven't been up on our pitches, so we have to bring you up someday. So next question was, what advice would you give to your 17-year-old self? And
an excellent question.
Really excellent question.
I think, often people ask me that, is there one regret or is there one thing that you could change? Or, if you could go back to that stage of 16, 17 years of age, what would you do? And very simply, I say very simply in the lightest possible terms, I would speak up in day one in the middle of fifth year. I wish I had spoken up, and that would be my advice to absolutely everyone on the call. No matter a problem, big or small, that you're going through, speak up in day one, because that's what I wish I'd done in the middle of fifth year. I thought I was, so naive and thinking it was hormonal changes going on in my body. I would never wish what went on for me to my worst enemy for those 2 years. And that was my one regret. Although the path that I've known that is thereafter has been hugely difficult, I have my good and bad days, but it's been hugely fulfilling. Being able to, go back and enjoy my life and actually being open and honest about kind of those difficult days that I may have. So my advice to my younger self would be speak up in day one.
Okay, very good. Now I have a very good question just in. Was it scary to start talking about how you really felt?
Yes, massively, absolutely massively. I remember when I was in St. Pat's, and when I kind of really started unearthing everything that was going on for me, the doctor and psychologist were asking me, questions that I thought were quite intrusive, but they were just normal questions. Is that okay? I don't know whether I broke up there.
No, go.
Okay. Sorry, yeah. It was hugely scary. I think it was intimidating. But in a strange way, as I kind of came out of my first psychology session in St. Pat's, I kind of felt that kind of like weight off my shoulders. I took a deep exhalation And I was just like, God, why haven't I done that? Why didn't I do that 2 years ago? As scary as it was a huge relief and a hugely kind of, I guess, proud moment that I managed to achieve something that I put away for 2 years too long. And I remember the weeks after that, I wouldn't shut up. You couldn't stop me talking, you know. And I got to that stage, and even on a serious note, as I speak about that, how intimidating it was to speak up in day one, I got to a stage where, you know, I couldn't help but speak. I just kept on talking, and I actually got to a stage, and I'm sure people can relate to it being there. You get to a point in time then where you feel like you don't want to talk, and you feel like you're going back within yourself. And a piece of advice that I was given on these days that you don't want to talk is actually to write your thoughts and feelings down. So speak to your page, you know, get those emotions, get those fears, a rational bit of thinking down on that page and speak to your page, because there are going to be days where you don't want to talk. And I still have that, but now I can actually speak to my page, and you'll find it hugely beneficial, I think.
Brilliant, listen, thanks. So another question is, what sport are you playing now?
What sport am I playing now? I might as well. I think Paddy will attest for this. I think I might as well be an athletics runner at this moment. I think my best friend is a wall ball at the minute. And now, look, on a serious note and a good piece of news, I think for hopefully everyone listening on the call, I've been really lucky to be drafted back in with the Dublin Senior Footballers as of just last month. I was back in on very much a peripheral basis at the back end of last year, while the kind of COVID kind of season was being played out, and I managed to impress enough to warrant a call back up. So Gaelic football, and I'm hoping to be back on top of the Hogan Sand steps.
We are delighted to hear it, because I know that my brother, who was a similar age to you, who's like, listen, that guy, rising star. So we're delighted to hear that now. A question that's come in a couple of different formats is, if you know someone who is suffering with mental health issues, what can you do to help without being intrusive? Which I think is a really good question.
Excellent one. I think, you know, if I was kind of, you know, play something on it, and it probably sounds like the most simple of things, but I think I referred to it as well, where I said, when you're going through the most difficult of times, the smallest of gestures mean the most to that person. And I referred to a story even when I came out of St. Pat's. After my 11 weeks, I was drafted back into Dublin Senior setup. I was hugely apprehensive going back into my first training session. I was thinking, how are the lads going to see me? How are they going to perceive me? What are they going to think? You know, and it was a senior figure in the dressing room in the shape of Paul Flynn, who come over to me on my first day back, and he pat me on the back and he just said, good to see you back, mate. And that for me was the biggest thing that he could have ever done. I said to him years later, he was like, how do you remember that? As in, like, I go, Paul, that was the biggest thing for me, the biggest gesture. So I think, without wanting to offend anyone, just little small gestures. So give them a little text, give them a little call, you know, tell them you're thinking about them, you know, give them a little compliment, a pat on the back. You may not think it's the biggest thing, but for those people that are going through the most difficult times, I guarantee you, and I can attest for that, that it will mean the most to them. Yeah,
and that is so pertinent, I think. Another question, how are you coping with COVID? Any tips?
Yes, and it's the golden question, how are we all coping? And if I was to speak from a very selfish point of view, I think, you know, I've taken COVID in my stride. As I said, I've seen it as a challenge. I was probably lucky enough to be in a part-time job, or while I was kind of writing the book, down on my local garage in Texaco, that was seen as essential service. So it kind of kept me busy for maybe 25, 30 hours a week, which is great. And away from that, I kind of just then, as I spoke about, that kind of structure piece, I just kind of made sure I planned in things that I could look forward to, be physical exercise, watching something, you know, my favorite comedians, Dara O'Brien, Lee Evans, you know, something to give me a little belly laugh, you know, in these difficult times. And those are the little kind of tips that I would say to people. You know, find a little challenge as well. If you are doing the infamous probably 5Ks that we've all been on, you know, change it up a bit. You know, get on to your mates. What kind of times are you running? Are you doing anything different? Are you, you know, you're playing a bit of ball? Are you kicking a bit of ball? How much are you kicking each week? And have a little competition, you know. Change it up. Change your route if you are running. And little things like that. So I guess from a personal point of view, I'm coping quite well. And just kind of taking each day as it comes, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny, one thing I started watching was on Netflix Headspace. They do a meditation piece, and I found that brilliant.
Yes.
Because I think it's about 20 minutes long, and it's really simple. And the guy is a previous Buddhist monk, and he's the most calming, gorgeous voice, soothing voice ever. So I recommend everybody here to try Netflix Headspace if you're ever thinking, Jesus, now I need to kind of sort the head out for my day ahead.
Yeah.
So let me see, another question. Do you think things would have been different if you talked to someone earlier in fifth year when you stated you felt something was changing?
I do hugely, and I think, you know, I'm probably, you know, being a bit kind of you know, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I use this cliche of, you know, it's the journey that I've been on, the experiences that I had through those 2 years has certainly shaped me into the man I am today. You know, and I don't regret per se the journey that I did go on. I wish things were different. Of course, I probably would have been different, because when I went through those 2 years of the deep and dark place that I went to, I guess I learned a lot about myself thereafter. And I'm sure I would have done that in different kind of circumstances, whether it be going into, you know, college, or, you know, a different social setting, or relationships, or stuff like that, as we all kind of go on, you know, a general kind of life journey, and we learn things about ourselves. I guess I probably learned a bit more about myself earlier on than probably what I should have. I've probably lived a lot of probably what a 26-year-old probably wouldn't have lived, certainly at 19 years of age. But I think, as I said, it shaped me into the man that I am today. Of course, it would have been different if I'd spoken up from day one, but I don't have any kind of regrets in terms of, you know, wishing things were different, because it is my story. It is who I am.
And it's funny, I was just going to say that I know it sounds quite American, but it's part of your journey. And that is actually, I know it sounds kind of American and cliched, but actually it's such a true thing. It is part of your journey to where you are today. Okay, this is a funny one. You said, I'm not sure if this is accusatory, you said you wanted to play for Man United. How do you think they're doing now? And Liverpool, question mark.
Oh, Jesus. Well, I'm glad you actually threw in Liverpool there, because after them, was it last night, they lost again. So
yeah, oh Jesus. Liverpool sport is in this house, so it's not a good time for us.
No, I'm an avid Man United supporter, and even the days I remember, I've kind of gone to Croke Park with my dad in front of a packed capacity crowd, 82,500 people. I remember going to Old Trafford, you know, 70 plus, 80 plus thousand people. And, you know, any kid's young dream, as in any sports enthusiast, I think both Gaelic and soccer were my true two loves. And I was just looking on upon the likes of kind of Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, all these lads, you know, that I absolutely loved. And I would have been loved to kind of get there. I played soccer at quite a high level. And I just so happened to go down the journey of Gaelic football. So, no, they're probably, they are doing better than Liverpool. So any Liverpool supporters out there, you know, I think Paddy's a Liverpool supporter, from what I'm saying.
No, I'm not.
There he is.
Now he pipes up.
Nottingham Forest, Shane.
Oh, okay.
Oh, jeez.
All right. Okay, so Bar, I'm going to finish with a question where I'm going to make you give us some nice insights into Desi Farrell and you know, a bit of goss. But before I go to my final question, my second last question, unless we have any more hands up or any more questions, my second last question from the floor is, how would you recommend the mentors set the scene to players that if they have a mental health issue, to talk to someone they know? I'm not really sure. I just read that directly out, so hopefully you can make sense of that.
Yeah, I think if I may have be taking this up in a different way, but how I can understand that in terms of how can you convey to a player, if they are going through difficulty, what do they do, or where can they go? Now I know it's been done in some clubs, and it can definitely be kind of done when we're back. I think I speak for a lot of people, sooner rather than later, but to maybe just have that kind of delicate there, in terms of that one person, that one good coach. In shape for me, it was Desi Farrell. I knew I could speak up to him, and I guess to maybe make the players aware that, be it Paddy, Jane, John, whoever it may be, is the person you go to if you are having a difficult time. You know, and again, they can be that springboard to go on to kind of professional help. So just making them aware that there are people, or that one person that you can go to, either through text or phone call, or a little word at the side of train, whatever they are comfortable with, just to make them aware, though, that there is someone there if you are going through a difficult time.
Okay, that is absolutely perfect, and that makes so much sense. Okay, so finally, if you have any gossip for us, like on the team or Desi or any of that stuff, anything to tell us that we don't know?
Any gossip? And I get.
What's he really like? Come on, tell us all the gossip.
So actually, Clucko, genuinely Clucko. I think for a lot of people, he's
A machine.
He's a machine. He's an absolute machine. And on one serious note, I genuinely do think he's going to go down as the greatest of all time. I got to experience that, so lucky from such a young age, of what it meant to be a Dublin senior footballer, and think he epitomised that. I remember going up to sessions back in 2013 when I was still in school, and I was thinking I was finishing off a bit late. I need to rest at home and, get a bit of grub into me. I'll go up to training. And Clucko, I learn, has been there for 45 minutes to an hour already, practicing his free kicks, practicing his skill set of the game. And I think it comes as no surprise he's going to go down as one of the greatest of all time, because I've seen firsthand what exactly he does, and still to this day, all that he's achieved, I still know he exact same person, hasn't changed.
Yeah.
He is a good bit of crack. He's a good a good bit of laugh. He loves a blue wicket on a night out, funny enough. So he's a bit crazy on that. And then I'm probably actually going to throw myself under the bus. I don't know whether this is interesting or peculiar. I think, and as a question probably I ask, and I look around, you often see players going onto the pitch and pre-match and kind of just checking out the surroundings, the pitch, what it's going to be like in terms of just like a stud or a mouldy. And you often see them obviously with their headphones on or their AirPods on, and you're probably thinking, what are they listening to, or what are they kind of thinking and stuff like that. And there was this question that my sisters asked me maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It was a match down in Cork. Cork features quite prominently in my stories. We were playing them in the National League down there, and we were walking onto the pitch and just checking it out, and I had my headphones on, and my sisters were there before the game. I was like, I wonder what he's listening to. And they actually asked me after the game, and you probably think I'm listening to a bit of rap or Eminem or Drake or Jay-Z or something like that. I was listening to Carly Rae Jepsen, Call Me Maybe. So I think I don't know why I throw myself under the bus, but
listen, I am proud of you for actually admitting that.
I think I've been open and honest enough that I can probably take a slagging for that. So
yeah, you know what, I like it. Listen, I have no more questions, but I just want to say to you, you're an absolute breath of fresh air, Shane. How honest and open you've been, and everything you've shared tonight, I have found absolutely inspiring. So I just want to say, on behalf of Beann Eadair Club and on behalf, hopefully, of all of us here tonight, I just want to say thank you so much. And listen, we'll get you up to our pitches, right? We need to get you up to Beann Eadair. It's the best view in Ireland, as we all know. Actually, a little training session with some of the lads, right? We'll talk to you. Paddy, we'll get him doing something, yeah?
I have him. He doesn't know it yet, but he's going to be coming to do something with adult footballers. I promised Martin McGee that I'll get Shane Carthy up there. So we'll sort that out tomorrow, Shane.
Excellent.
Absolutely, Paddy. I'll change my number.
I know where you live. Thanks, mate.
Brilliant. Listen,
no problem at all. And thanks very much.
Brilliant. Listen, thanks, guys. And listen, thanks to everybody for joining this evening. And Shane, most of all, thanks to you. See everybody.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks a million.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers, Jay.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Well done.
Well done.